parents, let's be honest for a moment. When you're choosing a school for your child, you dive deep into all the visible decisions. I mean, you spend countless hours comparing curricula, right? Is it CBSE, State Board, or IB?
Exactly. You're looking at the things that are easy to quantify, the things that show up in the glossy brochure.
To pedagogical styles, the science labs, even the sports program.
We think of these as the sort of the hardware of a child's education. And they are important, but they're not the main thing.
Today we're focusing on something else. The core, silent decision that happens way beneath all that visible comparison. It's a decision that's often made by accident or just an emotional reaction, but it's the one thing that really decides your child's future.
And that's language.
Language.
It's the operating system. It's the framework that all other learning is built on. And if that operating system is glitchy, nothing else works properly.
So it determines their confidence, their sense of belonging.
All of it. Confidence, belonging, academic success, and how they integrate socially, especially in these complex multilingual environments they're going to face.
The stakes here are they're massive, especially for the globally mobile family, or even a child just navigating a demanding local system. So our mission today is to move past those emotional knee-jerk reactions that drive so many of these choices.
The fear, or just following a trend.
Right, and instead design a practical, rational, and, a truly long-term language strategy.
Because the scary part about language strategy is that mistakes, they don't show up right away.
No.
They're insidious.
Yeah.
They don't surface in the first year or two when your child is just, picking up basic conversation. The mistakes show up years later.
Yeah.
And they're often disguised as something else entirely.
Like what?
Like a deep insecurity in high-stakes situations.
Yeah.
Or just a prolonged silence in the classroom. Or maybe a fundamental confusion about who they are and what they're capable of. So we have to get clear on this now.
Okay, so let's start by diagnosing the problem. If language choice is so critical, what are the psychological pressures pushing parents to make bad decisions?
Well, our research shows it's almost always driven by four main, very powerful, and often competing fears.
4 fears.
We call them the 4 magnetic fears.
Magnetic. Why magnetic?
Because they pull parents in opposite directions, and it leads to paralysis or, overcompensate.
Okay, lay them out for us.
The first 2 are a reaction to the world we live in. First, there's the overwhelming fear of losing English.
Of course. I mean, that's seen as the key to global opportunity, to a good career.
Rightly so. But pulling in the exact opposite direction is the fear of losing the mother tongue.
The link to family, to heritage, to your roots.
Exactly. The language you use with grandparents. It's your emotional core.
So those 2 fears alone create this huge tension in a family. But you said there are 2 more related to performance.
Absolutely. The third is the fear of global irrelevance. Will my child be able to compete internationally, for a university spot or a job, if we prioritize our regional language in those early years?
And the 4th is the flip side of that coin.
It is the fear of local exclusion. If we go all in on English and international boards, will my child ever really feel like they belong here in the community where they actually live?
Wow. And when parents get caught between these 4 pressures and they try to solve all of them at once, what happens to the child?
The result is predictable and really damaging. They try to do everything.
The 4-in-1 deal.
Right. They put the child in a school with 3 languages, hire a tutor for a 4th, insist on the mother tongue at home, and it often leads to what we call shallow fluency.
Shallow fluency, that sounds like a facade of capability.
It's exactly that. The child can chat about movies or their day in, say, 3 languages, but they lack the deep mastery in any one of them to handle complex cognitive work.
Like analytical reasoning or expressing a really nuanced emotion?
Exactly. It leads to a confused identity because there's no linguistic anchor, and most critically, it results in weak academic language. They sound confident, but they can't perform when it really counts.
So the goal isn't just more languages.
No. Language strategy is not about the quantity of languages. It is all about sequencing and purpose.
Sequencing. So which one comes first and when you add the others?
Precisely. And defining the purpose for each one. That clarity is what prevents the child from feeling, linguistically scattered.
Okay, let's unpack this foundational idea then, that language shapes thinking, not just speaking. This feels like the piece that's always missing from those parent-teacher meetings.
It really is. We tend to see language as just a transaction. I talk, you listen. But what's happening inside the child's mind is so much more profound.
So when a child is learning their first language, they're not just learning words.
They're building the internal architecture of their thought. Children think in the language they own most deeply. That first language determines their reasoning style, how they build an argument, how they even categorize the world around them.
And their confidence too, you said.
Absolutely. It dictates their problem-solving confidence.
This is where we so often misdiagnose a child's struggle, isn't it? If a child is struggling in school, we assume they're not smart enough, or maybe they're just lazy.
That is the default assumption, and it's so often wrong. It's a huge disservice to the child. The key insight for every parent and teacher is this. A child who is struggling to think clearly may not be intellectually weak.
So what's the real issue?
They are very often trying to think in a language that they simply don't fully own. It's not the language of their deepest cognitive roots. They're running on a borrowed or constantly translated mental framework.
Let's talk about that borrowed framework. What does that constant need to translate internally do to a child's brain?
It creates what we call cognitive friction.
Cognitive friction. Okay, bring that down for me.
Imagine you're trying to run really complex, high-end software on an old, underpowered computer.
It would be incredibly slow and glitchy.
Exactly. The friction slows everything down. The child might understand a concept instantly in their mother tongue, but translating that concept into the school's language, just to answer a question, it takes up precious time and energy.
Energy that should be going into analysis and creativity.
Precisely. And this friction creates immense instability for globally mobile kids who are constantly having to switch their linguistic demands.
And it's not just one switch, right? It's layered.
It is. These kids have a 3-layer language reality they have to navigate every single day. And if we fail to support any one of those layers, the whole structure becomes unstable.
Okay, let's define those 3 layers, because I think they often get blurred together.
The first and most important is the home language. This is the language of comfort, of unconditional love.
The emotional anchor.
Yes. Its function is identity formation. If this layer is weak, the child's emotional core lacks stability, no matter how well they do on their exams. The second is the school language. This is formal, structured. Its function is high-stakes performance and assessment.
This is for writing essays, understanding the curriculum, taking tests.
It demands precision, formal vocabulary. If this layer is weak, academic success is basically impossible, no matter how brilliant the child is.
And the third layer, the one that probably determines their day-to-day happiness.
The social language. The language of the playground, the cafeteria. Its job is social integration. It's fast, it's full of slang, it's about belonging.
So a child could get a 99% on an exam in their school language.
And be completely isolated because they can't keep up with the fast, casual social language of their friends. Ignoring any of these 3 creates a systemic imbalance.
And here's the really tricky part, right? Parents often miss the signs that these layers are crumbling. A child won't come home and say, my cognitive load is too high.
No, of course not. The problem always shows up indirectly. It masks itself as a behavioral issue or a psychological one.
Because they don't have the words to explain it.
They lack the metacognitive vocabulary to say, I'm frustrated because I get the idea, but I can't build a persuasive argument in this language.
So instead, they use proxies.
Exactly. They retreat. They say, I don't like school, which is a proxy for, I'm terrified of speaking in that classroom.
Or, I'm bad at studies.
When what they mean is, I'm slow because of the translation gap. Or the most heartbreaking one, I don't talk much.
Yeah.
That's the classic choice. Silence over the risk of making a mistake.
That silence. That's the big red flag for language confusion, isn't it? When a child equates speaking with the risk of being seen as imperfect.
It is. And this confusion disguises itself as low confidence, which creates a dangerous cycle. The child knows the answer deep down in their home language, but they lack the confidence and the vocabulary to say it out loud in the school language, so they stay quiet.
And over months and years, that silence starts to feel like an identity.
It becomes their identity. They genuinely start to believe they are less capable than they actually are. The language choice becomes an identity choice.
This sets the stage perfectly for our deep dive into the specific boards. Let's start with CBSE, the Central Board of Secondary Education. What is the official position on language in that framework?
Officially, the CBSE stance, especially with recent policy updates, is very supportive of multilingualism.
On paper, at least.
On paper, yes. It promotes a strong foundation in the mother tongue, or home language, alongside Hindi and other Indian languages, with English as the main medium of instruction. It even allows for different exam language choices in some cases. It really respects the country's linguistic diversity.
It sounds ideal, really. A balanced approach that honors heritage but prepares kids for a globalized world. But we know that policy and reality in the classroom can be two very different things.
They can be worlds apart. The ground reality in most private competitive CBSE schools is a massive and systemic skew toward English dominance.
So the policy says one thing.
But the day-to-day instruction, the textbooks, the classroom discussions, it's all overwhelmingly in English. The mother tongue is often just, another subject.
A cultural accessory almost.
That's a great way to put it. It's not treated as a core cognitive tool.
And this focus on English, combined with the intense competition in the CBSE system, it leads to a very exam-oriented way of teaching, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Because the final high-stakes exam that gets you into college is mostly in English, the teaching immediately becomes about how to produce exam-ready English answers.
Which creates a paradox for the student.
A huge one. They often develop excellent social English. They can talk about movies, social media, whatever. But they struggle severely with academic English.
Can you define that gap for us? Social versus academic English in the CBSE world?
Sure. Academic English is a completely different beast. Social English is informal, it's forgiving. Academic English demands precision, formal vocabulary, complex sentences to show cause and effect. A student might say big in a conversation, but an academic paper needs significant or substantial.
And that specific skill set gets rushed.
It gets rushed, or it's just not taught effectively, which leads to a huge gap when they get to higher education.
This brings us to a really critical concept, the translation gap. This feels like where bright, hardworking students can really falter.
This is the invisible performance killer. I mean, think about the typical CBSE student. They've spent years thinking, reasoning, learning complex ideas in, say, history or physics, using their mother tongue as their main mental tool.
But then the board exam comes.
And for 3 hours, they have to produce all of that complex analysis and synthesis entirely in English.
So what does that mandatory real-time mental translation do to their final score?
The consequences are measurable and, frankly, devastating. First, it makes them write much, much slower. They're not just writing, they're drafting in one language and translating to another, sentence by agonizing sentence.
And the quality of the writing suffers.
Hugely. It leads to weaker expression. The deep, nuanced thought they had in their mother tongue gets simplified because they're just reaching for the easiest English word, not the most precise one.
Awkward phrasing, simplified arguments.
Exactly, and the net effect is a loss of marks. The examiner isn't grading the brilliant thought in the student's head. They're grading the English prose on the page.
Yeah.
The core issue is not low intelligence. It is a profound lack of language alignment between their internal thought and their external output.
And yet, despite all this, the CBSE system produces a huge number of very capable students. So what linguistic strengths are developed in this high-pressure environment?
The pressure itself forges certain skills. Because the curriculum is so structured and exam-focused, CBSE kids often develop an early ability to handle very complex formal texts. They get drilled in specific exam vocabulary, and they master a very structured way of writing.
A 5-paragraph essay.
The classic 5-paragraph answer with a clear thesis, evidence, conclusion. It's a structure that's highly valued in formal academic settings.
And what are the long-term benefits of those skills?
They're perfectly suited for 2 things. First, Indian competitive exams, which heavily favor that kind of structured recall. And second, the written demands of many global universities. But, and this is a huge caveat for parents, these written strengths do not automatically guarantee spoken confidence.
Or the ability to just have an open, reflective discussion.
That remains the weakness.
So for a parent who has chosen the CBSE path, what's the working language strategy to get the best of both worlds?
It has to be a 3-part strategy. And it has to be deliberate. It goes beyond what the school does.
Okay.
First, you must strengthen the mother tongue deliberately at home. This is the non-negotiable anchor. Use it for complex conversations, debating ideas, discussing current events. Keep that thinking engine powerful.
And second?
Second, you have to build academic English deliberately. Support what the school is doing. Actively teach the formal vocabulary, the transition words, the things the exam demands. Reinforce the precision of that school language.
Okay, and the third part sounds crucial for confidence.
It is. Third, encourage speaking freely in English without constant correction anxiety. Let them use their imperfect social English at the dinner table. You have to create a space where they know the standards for an essay are high, but the standards for a conversation are just about connection.
So the home has to differentiate between the formal and the informal.
Exactly. CBSE works best when the home language anchors the deep thought, and the school language provides the formal tool for the world. They have to complement each other, not compete.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, let's shift now to the other end of the spectrum. State boards, which have a fundamentally different philosophy.
Yes, with state boards, the emphasis shifts dramatically. The philosophy is about prioritizing the regional language, Marathi, Tamil, Bengali, whatever it may be. It's rooted in cultural continuity and, most importantly, building conceptual clarity through the mother tongue.
And what's the immediate cognitive benefit of that deep focus?
It inherently builds deep thinking ability. When a child learns a complex concept, say in math or science, they're doing it in the language they hear everywhere, at home, in the market. The connection is seamless. There is zero translation friction.
What's so interesting is that many parents feel that prioritizing a regional language is somehow limiting or old-fashioned, but the cognitive research tells a very different story.
It absolutely does. The research confirms what we call the underrated advantage of strong mother tongue skills. Because the child isn't wasting cognitive energy on translation, they can dedicate all of it to reasoning.
So they grasp concepts faster.
Much faster. They reason better, they grasp abstract ideas more quickly, and they can express complex emotions with more clarity and authenticity.
So the mother tongue is much more than just culture and stories.
It's a thinking accelerator, not a handicap. When you learn a tough new idea in a language you already own deeply, your brain is free to just wrestle with the idea itself, not the language used to describe it.
That's a powerful asset. But we have to talk about the counterpoint. The global limitation, the professional world, the global university, they still run on English.
That is the reality check. The challenge arises specifically without strategic supplementation. If a state board education creates incredible depth, but academic English lags behind, there will be problems when that child moves into a global classroom.
What does that look like in practice?
Confidence just plummets. State board curricula often focus on structured, written answers, not open-ended verbal debate in English. So the student knows the answer inside and out in their mother tongue, but the fear of making a linguistic mistake in English is paralyzing. They hesitate. They retreat into silence.
So once again, we have to be really clear for parents. The problem isn't the mother tongue.
No, the mother tongue is the cognitive power source. The problem is the lack of structured English exposure needed to share that deep thinking with the rest of the world.
So for parents who want that deep anchor from a state board but also need global agility for their kids, what's the supplementation strategy that actually works?
The strategy is key. Do not replace the mother tongue. That would be sacrificing the thinking accelerator. Instead, you add English strategically as a second powerful tool.
What does that look like beyond just hiring a tutor?
It means specific actions at home. First, introduce English storytelling and discussion on complex topics that aren't homework. Use English to talk about a history documentary or a science concept. Build vocabulary in a low-pressure way.
Okay.
Second, focus on spoken confidence first. Let the child speak imperfectly. Fluency, just the ability to keep talking, is more important than perfect accuracy in the beginning.
So don't obsess over grammar.
Exactly. Delay the obsession with grammar until they have a solid foundation of just using the language. Overcorrecting early on just paralyzes them. And finally, build vocabulary through context reading books, watching films, and debating the ideas in English. Treat it like a skill, not a subject.
So it's about building English as an operational tool that complements the cognitive depth they're getting from the regional language.
It's about practical utility. They have the deep-rooted foundation. Now they're building the professional, operational layer of high-level English on top of that.
Which brings us to our third major pathway, the IB International Baccalaureate, which is explicitly designed for the globally mobile family. How does the IB philosophy tackle language differently?
The IB framework is built around multilingualism as a modern necessity. It sees language as a communication tool, a cultural bridge, and the medium for inquiry. The whole structure is designed for flexibility.
Can you break down that structure for us?
Sure. It categorizes language by purpose. You have language A, which is meant to be the child's strongest, most rigorous language, the one they think deeply in. Then there's language B, which is about acquiring a new language, often the language of the host country, and they have bilingual programs, all designed for kids who are expected to move a lot.
And why does this structure seem to make IB kids so adaptive when they relocate?
Because the core IB teaching style is about inquiry and discussion. Language is lived, not memorized. They're constantly encouraged to use language, to collaborate, to think critically, to reflect out loud.
So the result is high verbal agility.
Yes, and linguistic resilience. They're trained to discuss ideas openly, even if their grammar isn't perfect. This functional focus means they pick up host country languages faster because they're just used to using language outside their comfort zone. They adapt socially much more quickly.
It's a real shift from accuracy to fluency and inquiry.
A deliberate one. The confidence to use language as a tool is prized above grammatical perfection.
But this raises a really important question for parents who are, seduced by this idea of having a multilingual prodigy by age 12. What's the hidden risk?
This is a critical blind spot for many families. The primary risk is a lack of academic depth. The constant need to adapt and acquire new languages can lead to the child having high verbal confidence, but failing to achieve true academic rigor in any single language.
Even their mother tongue.
Even their mother tongue, or their supposed language A. They might be linguistically rich, but intellectually shallow.
They develop what you called surface-level multilingualism.
Yes. They have immense social confidence. They'll speak up anywhere. But that confidence lacks the rigor to write a 10-page university paper or synthesize 3 conflicting research articles.
Can you give us a concrete example of this hollow fluency hitting a crisis point?
It often hits during the college application process or in the first year of university. The student is impressive in an interview. They talk about their global experience, their multiple languages, but when they have to submit a piece of sustained, rigorous critical writing, their work falters.
It's grammatically correct, but
it lacks rhetorical power, sophisticated vocabulary, and deep structural complexity. Their language confidence was hollow. Great for talking, not enough for thinking and writing at a high level.
So the parents prioritize the glamour of the label over the rigor of mastery in one anchor language.
That's the danger. True cognitive mastery requires sustained effort in one language first, before you spread that effort out.
And speaking of global reality, we know high-level English alone often isn't enough for true integration, is it?
Not at all. That's the reality check for families in Europe, the Middle East, East Asia. The IB classroom might be in English, but real social belonging happens in the host language. If you only speak English in Munich or Seoul, you're always in the expat bubble. You're an observer, not a participant.
So the IB gives them the tools to learn that language quickly, but the parents still have to push them to practice it in the real world.
It's essential. The family has to enforce the immersion. They have to actively push the child out of the English bubble and into the local community.
So putting this all together, the mobility, the structure, the risks, what does a successful IB language strategy look like?
Success in the IB requires a commitment to what we call layered multilingualism.
Layered, not scattered.
Exactly. Each language has a defined high-value purpose. First, mother tongue continuity must be maintained at home, rigorously. That's the emotional anchor. Second, structured academic English must be deliberately built to carry the IB curriculum and future university goals. That means high standards for writing.
And third, the social piece.
And third, respectful host language learning must be prioritized for belonging. When you stack these 3, they support each other. The deep thinking from the mother tongue supports the analysis in academic English, which in turn gives them the skills to quickly acquire the social language.
That's a fantastic, practical way to think about it. Layered, not scattered. It's active construction, not just passive hope.
When it's layered, the cognitive friction is reduced because the foundation is so strong.
Okay, as we wrap up this deep dive, let's bring it all back to the decision itself. What is the final framework parents should use before they even look at a school?
They need to reframe the questions they're asking. Move away from which school has the best reputation to which language framework will support my child's resilience and identity.
And you have a framework for that.
We recommend the Anchor, Carry, Belong framework.
Okay.
Parents need to ask 3 fundamental questions.
Anchor, carry, belong.
Okay. First, which language will anchor my child emotionally? This is about resilience, identity, family history. This is almost always the mother tongue, and you have to defend it fiercely.
Okay, second.
Second, which language will carry their academics long-term? This is about performance, rigor, university. For most global families, this will be high-level academic English.
And third, belong.
Which language will help them belong locally? This is about social happiness integration. If you plan to stay somewhere for more than a couple of years, the host country language has to be taken seriously.
That framework, anchor, carry, belong, it just cuts through all the noise and the emotional bias, doesn't it?
It forces you to be practical. Language strategy has to be survival planning, not just following a trend or an ideology.
Because at the end of the day, following a trend can get in the way of your child's actual cognitive and emotional needs.
It absolutely will.
So what does this all mean for you as you design your family strategy? It means recognizing that the depth of the foundation matters so much more than the size of the facade. A child who truly owns one language deeply, who can think, reason, and express their full emotional self in it, that child can learn many other languages confidently.
But a child who is fundamentally confused in language, who lacks that deep ownership and rigor in their main thinking tool, they will feel confused and insecure everywhere they go, no matter how many languages they can make small talk in.
Choose language with clarity, with rigor, and with purpose. Not fear, not fashion. We've given you the tools to analyze the reality of CBSE, state boards, and IB. Now you can design the strategy for your child's most powerful tool.